What's up, everybody? Wanted to bring my SpaceX Dragon onto the scene. I've been bringing things out here with me, some little props, you know. Imagine throwing this like a tomahawk, right? Some real Indian high tech rocket science going on there, you know, but it's all about holding. And obviously, the statistical thing of there being something magical about space, it seems, is probably just that all of a sudden in the geological record, you see all the rocks labeled and categoried. So, there's my little poetic freeze for you on Friday. And so I've taken all my time this morning. I had a very intense conversation with my parents. A lot of it has had to do with this modeling and just, you know, kind of like me getting more attention, and it's caused me to kind of start what I would say, you know, just sort of picking up my speed almost. Like, I would think that to an extent, what's really happened is I've picked up my speed so much that I've just started to drop almost everything that I think is unessential, you know? And I think in some way I needed to realize that, you know, perhaps there's something that I'm forgetting here. Perhaps there's something where, you know, I could meet myself from another time if I just went one more step, you know, or maybe it was just that my character was starting to look a little bit dicey there again, right? I mean, what I was taking it as is that all of a sudden, this is very serious. This idea of seeing different people, I thought was very serious, okay? Was what I was thinking. And I thought all of a sudden, how serious is it what you see within your life? And I have actually pushed this idea of art to the idea of it actually creating, I think, sort of a network which gives something such a great velocity that it almost propels it to some beyond state where, according to the nature of its rise and repeat, it actually becomes an apparent figure beyond what it calls its first place. And I think I had actually pushed that so far. If you really want to know what I actually really think is happening, that I was again actually instilling a sense of competition among other people, which I think probably the greatest falter of competition itself is taking risks. And everybody takes a risk. And what ultimately a risk technically is just stepping outside of your routine. Anything outside your routine. All of a sudden, everybody's starting to question their routine. Okay? Because all this stuff is becoming more apparent. Then all of a sudden people are wondering what they have and what they don't have. Is what I think was realistically what was going on. I mean, you know, sure, I could throw another explanation out there of, you know, that I was just about to get into some sort of situation that was just too big for me, you know? And it's probably good that I didn't get there or whatever. It just probably would have been too much for me to handle or whatever. Awoken something from some deep sleep, which is in a greater orbit than the orbit in which I now reside in. But that being the case, I've just all of a sudden, you know, really been dogged down by all these little ins and outs of this acting sort of thing. And so I'm going to give you guys my take on Hollywood, on art, okay? Um, and perhaps it will be an eloquent display of what rights things in their beginnings have, perhaps, up into what we can expect to have the more we think we have. And so I'm going to try to eloquently state that. And yes, I did kind of break my schedule today, and I'm sorry for whoever that was apparently made aware to, because yeah, I did all of a sudden realize that it was like I was like stirring up a bunch of stuff, like a bunch of sediment or whatever, you know what I mean? Which um, maybe it's from the awakening of some great thing, who knows, right? Or whatever. But I also have been like doing some very intense, interesting art. I mean, that art project I did the other day, like literally looking at it is just like, I mean, it's all made by my hands, but it is the most like insane thing to look at. I've made it basically. I'm gonna go with my um, instinct that I trusted my skills before, kind of thing, like knowing how everything worked and the idea that I was the one that made it. And now I feel like I can say it's something that's much more fun. But if you look at it from the right angle, you're probably still going to see that original piece, anyways. But now it definitely is like, I think, something that can blend in. Perhaps here, maybe whatever that is, I can sort of open that box up at a different time, right? Whoever's character personage that is, and whatever, you know what I mean, whatever play is at hand with that type of art coming through, um, the white space of the blink of an eye. But for right now, it's made so that, you know what, like it could be a friend's piece, it could be a children's piece, it could be a lot of things. And before it was, you know, like I really had no ill intentions from the beginning, but it was just so much like there. So I just felt like, okay, this thing's either never going to see the light of day kind of thing, because it's like the way that I actually was able to sort of do that light, like I'm telling you guys, to paint something like that took like, all this work that I've been doing philosophically and whatever else to keep giving me the motivation and focus that whole time, and this like crazy amount of like endurance and strength training I've been doing. Like that was a marathon and a half doing that, and it hurt. I'm telling you, it hurt. And it was like struggling trying to keep everything from just going wild and like coming apart and seeing the vision. And in the end, it was like glorious. It was like, oh, like extremely glorious. But the thing is like, if it's still there, and if you guys really loved it that much, then I'm sure that you know it's still there for whoever it is. Like me, I'm just the artist, but maybe for love, it's for something else. But whatever it was that I think you could have loved about it, if love is something that has a full-fledged character itself too, then I'm sure that that's still there. But now it's more something that can fit in anywhere a lot more around here. Okay. Um, and that being stated, I mean, good luck to anybody who tries to outdo me with that one. But that being the case, I've tried to put this all in a much more calculated way. Um, you know, that it's like perhaps maybe if there was a parallel universe to this one, but it wasn't an antiverse, it was a parallel verse, it would be all these were simple shapes, but expressions of sizes, and perhaps it could equate to the weight of this universe, with all of its shapes being either personable or having direction or purpose or being odd. And there's a few other examples of what could equate, right? Um, And I think then, if I can sort of detail a picture like that, then perhaps as everything sort of moves around, you know, like maybe I'll have to play Lucifer because maybe he's the only one who can hold the decision of saying that nothing is lost. Maybe he's the only one that goes through enough of everything to say that that's worth it. And the irony of the idea of opposites, and then with the idea of possession and knowledge of the more there is, if you don't actually have sort of an authoritative spirit, the less you have and the more there is of just suffering. Okay? Not saying that I'm Lucifer or Satan or Beelzebub or Diablo or Hades even. Okay? I'm just saying that. And that maybe that perhaps can hold the attitude of then saying that nothing is lost as they exchange between these realms. And I told you, gave you the idea of what these other realms could be, perhaps. So then, as things are creating, and if this world becomes more creative, and as I try to be more creative, I feel like I have to create a path for there to be a normalization point. I have to create the next level. These other people aren't describing the next level to me with this acting stuff. They're not describing the next level to me. Maybe they're describing an end. They're describing an ultimatum, an end, a contract. But no, I'm describing, ironically, infinity, but through another level, which means that we perceive this infinity. And that gives us the idea that there can be another normalization point, which actually has much more consideration for what is and what will be, along a path of there being not so much of a gap between those who have and those who have not. And then in that way, in every mysterious way that the world could work, I feel like it would work in a much more connected manner rather than in some manner in which it does not work as effectively. Maybe I'm describing some certain organizations that or whatever, and maybe I'm coming out politically actually how I feel, but it does matter exactly how I came out politically if it does actually mean that I'm a political party by my saying this way. Just like for perhaps the first people of a certain type of religion, it's different than the people who just jump aboard. Just like it's different for people who love sports, who've loved a team forever, and then there's people that jump on and love the team, okay? And that being the case, I just decided to do a whole overhaul on my YouTube channel. I polarized it. I went through and I sorted everything by what was voted. And yeah, maybe there's not a lot of votes, but I do think that to some extent it does show either I'm connecting with the algorithm if it's bots, or for a moment there's an instance that somebody does connect with what I'm doing. Forever how far that is, I use those 2 points to then plot a line where it was all things that according to the top 500, so there's some racing involved there, according to the top 500 of views and impressions, that I'm holding those views and impressions as sort of a parallel to a double linear expression along an XY axis where either the X or the Y represents, I'm calling them similes or words that mean the same thing, synonyms, okay? But the slight difference in them allows the way that either the X or the Y axis behaves, which gives us another dimension to that. as well. Okay. And yes, there's other axes too, but I will describe those. And so with that in place, that is how my channel is now set up. You click on the playlist Silent Majority because I stated it pretty rationally there as to how it could all work, you know? But again, rationally, I've made it so that everybody's opinions, if they do matter in my world, have some form of there being a agreement between the two, because I'm the one doing all the videos, but then you guys are the ones that are picking and choosing, which I think allows for, you know, it's like a game. It allows for a pretty eloquent expression of yourself. I've almost just created an RPG version of myself in this box right here, just for you guys. Whatever, you know what I mean? So have at it. I'm definitely looking much more like, you know what I mean? I'm a wilderness, like explorer, documenter kind of thing. Maybe interposed with a little bit of myth and a little bit of legend. Okay? Take that for however you will. Maybe it leads to there being expressions of creatures that you've never seen before. But I feel like in this context, creatures are much more than just animals. Okay? So take that for what it's worth. So yeah, now you guys have a sense of there being a representation of you, and I feel represented because I've made every single video that you guys have voted on, and now they're all categorically listed in one playlist according to me doing this for however many years. So there's some sort of level now, I feel like officially, for people that want to come back and visit. There's definitely things that are consistent and can be played on either stereotypically, racistly, but as for me, I'm just going to keep it as a race. And for this morning, I acknowledge that the first people that notice this, you're probably not in any way a lover of me right now. I say that because the first things that I was only interacting with this morning that I checked on was my dating stuff. And that's the only thing that really made its way to my eyes before all of a sudden everything else just got piled on top of me. So it's like, well, that made it there. And then basically all this like hurricane got just blown in the door. Like all of a sudden, all these other companies just came in like with their hands up in the air and wondering what to do and what's going on and what is this kid doing? Who is he even? And why is he saying these things? And what is he saying? I've never heard that before. Well, all of a sudden everyone wants to write it down. All of a sudden everybody wants to take a picture. All of a sudden everybody wants to understand, take me away and figure out what I really am. So, I'm up here with my best defense. It's a pretty complicated book, and I'm hiding in it. All my mind is thinking about is the words that describe me as a kid, and some memory that power and desire when you want it most expresses itself in some delay, where the more desire is, the greater your potential energy becomes, along a curve where your experience results in the quenching of desire or potential as it eventually becomes purely potential with no experience. What then results in decision or a choice that results in the gaining of experience or time that satisfies desire while decreasing potential with direction, where this graph can exist in multiplicity along a z-axis as well. or following of potentials and desires continuously along its gradual and perhaps parallel line to an undefined point, eventually becoming the idea of experience seen from the potential point. Perhaps a perspective shift there can change the XY axis so they are the same right there. It can be seamless or not. I imagine that the continuous line between experience and desire can go until either an activation is reached to create a parabola, what is a complete experience that eventually runs along the line of time, until enough time becomes desire or potential. And since it is all the same line that the graphed image is, it can appear to fluctuate with standard limits rather than running along the line for infinities. This ultimately results in the ability for the undefined point to remain with how well the graphing device you use is represented as a thing with no desires. Where the more the device has experience, I think all things will either result in the graph becoming parabolic with less undefined points, or it will turn back on itself and either create another curve, a circle for example, at a rate equal to the expression of the gap between desire and experience until it reaches experience with itself at the beginning of its point, or it will create any number of expressions that basically equalize to the idea that the greatest balancing act is that everything is balanced in direct comparison to the idea of absolutely nothing as an opposite. That has perhaps almost no feeling to it, but I am sure it is what I was thinking, so maybe it can be used as a painkiller of sorts or a carrier between desire, potential, and experience time. P.S. Sorry you just mentioned mental health, so I thought I would tell you what I really think is as close to the truth as possible if experience and time are represented as an idea of potential or perhaps desire. Again, I know this is what I was thinking. That's how to act. Rofist.